Moonlight breaks across a misty field. Two samurai face each other in perfect silence, katanas gleaming. They bow. Then in a blur of steel, the duel begins, elegant strikes, prolonged sword clashes, honor measured in every move. This is the samurai duel Hollywood has sold us for decades. It's also almost completely wrong. Real samurai warfare wasn't decided by flashy katana duels. It was decided by volleys of arrows darkening the sky and the thunder of war horses. The samurai were fearsome warriors, yes, but not in the cinematic way you've been taught to imagine. In this episode, we're shattering the myths and revealing how samurai actually fought on the battlefield. The katana is iconic. It's the weapon that defines the samurai in popular imagination, the perfectly folded steel blade, the lightning-quick draw, the elegant cutting techniques passed down through generations. But here's the reality: for centuries, elite samurai were horseback archers first and swordsmen second. The bow, not the sword, was called the way of the warrior. Samurai trained from childhood to shoot accurately from a galloping horse, a skill that required years of practice and extraordinary discipline. In actual battles, lethal arrow storms would often decide the fight long before swords were ever drawn. Historian Thomas Conlon analyzed battle reports from the Genpei War and found that most casualties came from arrows. Warriors preferred to cut down foes from a safe distance rather than engage in the high-risk chaos of close combat. Picture medieval Japanese battles less like The Last Samurai and more like ranged firefights, lines of mounted archers loosing volley after volley into enemy formations, then wheeling away before the response could reach them. The iconic katana. A revered weapon, certainly. A symbol of the samurai class and their spiritual discipline. But on the battlefield, it was a backup weapon, what you used when your arrows were spent and your spear broke. The sword was for desperate situations, not the primary tool of warfare. This isn't Hollywood's version, but it's far more strategically sound. Why risk your life in close combat when you could win from 100 yards away? One bow, one target. Behind him. Forget the choreographed one-on-one showdowns where combatants circle each other for minutes, testing resolve with elaborate techniques. Real samurai fights were brutal, chaotic, and shockingly brief. When swords were finally drawn or warriors clashed with yari spears, combat ended fast. A duel might be over in one or two moves, a well-placed thrust through an armor weak point, a grappling maneuver ending with a dagger to the throat, a mounted warrior riding down a foot soldier who never had a chance. And samurai were absolutely not above fighting unceremoniously. They ambushed enemies on the march. They swarmed isolated warriors in groups. They cut down fleeing opponents from behind without hesitation. The romantic notion of honorable single combat, two warriors meeting as equals in a fair fight, was largely a later ideal, popularized during the peaceful Edo period when actual warfare had become rare. In reality, winning was the ultimate honor, achieved by whatever effective means necessary. There was nothing dishonorable about using superior tactics, numbers, or surprise. The goal wasn't to demonstrate your sword technique, it was to survive and claim victory for your lord. Chronicles from the period are filled with accounts that would horrify modern audiences expecting samurai chivalry. Warriors describe pulling opponents from horses, multiple men stabbing a single enemy, finishing off wounded foes, taking advantage of any opening. This wasn't cowardice, this was professional warfare conducted by men who understood that the battlefield had no rules except victory and defeat. Here's something Hollywood almost never shows: victorious samurai didn't just sheath their swords and bow respectfully to fallen opponents. They took heads. In battle, samurai actively sought to collect the severed heads of enemies to prove their deeds and earn rewards from their lords. This wasn't an occasional practice, it was a fundamental part of their warrior culture. Kill counts weren't abstract numbers, they were physical trophies that determined your status, your income, and your family's future. After major battles, victors would spend hours collecting heads, cleaning them, and carefully tagging them with the names of who killed whom. Generals would then inspect long lines of severed heads presented on wooden racks, verifying kills and distributing rewards accordingly. Important enemy commanders' heads were treated with particular ceremony, sometimes displayed publicly, sometimes returned to families for burial, but always serving as proof of victory. This headhunting culture was so embedded that etiquette manuals explained the proper way to present a head to your lord. There were specialists whose job was to prepare heads for inspection, washing them, combing the hair, applying makeup to make them presentable. It was a grisly ritual that underscored a harsh truth: samurai warfare was about measurable results, not abstract chivalry. Your reputation, your rewards, your family's prosperity, all depended on physical evidence of your battlefield performance. The severed head in your hand was worth more than a dozen stories of your courage. This wasn't savagery for its own sake. It was a system, brutal, yes, but effective at motivating warriors and maintaining accountability in the chaos of medieval warfare. By the 16th century, samurai warfare evolved yet again in ways Hollywood rarely depicts. Portuguese traders introduced firearms to Japan in 1543, and within decades, the arquebus musket became a dominant battlefield weapon. The Battle of Nagashino in 1575 saw Oda Nobunaga deploy 3,000 musketeers behind wooden palisades, shredding the elite cavalry charges that had dominated Japanese warfare for centuries. It was one of the first examples of massed gunpowder firepower deciding a major battle in Asia. Suddenly, samurai who had spent their lives perfecting archery and swordsmanship faced enemies who could kill from hundreds of yards away with minimal training. The response? They adapted. Samurai incorporated firearms into their arsenals, developed new tactics for combined arms warfare, and built massive infantry armies that would have been unrecognizable to their ancestors. This period of warfare, with its guns, its enormous armies, its castle sieges involving tens of thousands of soldiers, is almost never shown in samurai films, which prefer the more pure image of sword-wielding warriors. But this adaptation reveals something crucial about the samurai: they weren't mystic warriors bound to tradition. They were professionals who understood that survival required embracing new technology and tactics. When spears were most effective, they used spears. When bows dominated battlefields, they became master archers. When guns arrived, they learned to use guns. Through all these eras, one truth remained constant: real samurai combat was about discipline, organization, strategy, and lethal efficiency. The legends of noble duels and lone sword masters wandering the countryside, perfecting their technique through spiritual discipline, these stories aren't entirely fiction. They're rooted in real traditions that developed during Japan's long periods of peace, when martial arts became more about philosophy than battlefield effectiveness. But these were the exception, not the rule. On actual battlefields, samurai won through coordinated archery volleys, combined arms tactics, ruthless exploitation of enemy weaknesses, and a very human capacity for adaptation. They dominated warfare in medieval Japan not through magic or mysticism, but through superior organization, training, and a willingness to do whatever it took to achieve victory. Knowing this doesn't diminish the samurai, it makes their achievements even more impressive. They weren't superhuman warrior poets living by an unbreakable code. They were professionals who mastered the most effective military technologies of their era, adapted when those technologies changed, and built a warrior culture that dominated Japan for centuries. They were strategic thinkers who understood that survival required both courage and calculation. The Hollywood version is beautiful. But the real story, of warriors who combined archery, cavalry tactics, infantry coordination, and eventually firearms into one of history's most effective military systems, is far more remarkable. The samurai didn't need Hollywood's myths. The truth was impressive enough: